I'll be talking about robots, and I'll start with my research vision or my research goal, which is to have socially autonomous robots interacting with people in the real world over long periods of time. And by real world, I mean places where we people usually go to, like schools, museums, train stations, shopping malls, or even perhaps our homes. And we all go to these places, and we have lots of technology there and other types of technological machines and devices, but we don't really see robots, too many robots there yet. So why is that? And first of all, where are the robots then? So we have a lot of robots in our department at KTH, for example, so in our laboratories. We can see some robots in factories today, but they usually are not working next to humans, so they have their special place in assembly lines, and humans don't dare to go there. Or we can even see robots in space, exploring new life forms and new environments. But so why are robots not among us today? And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the research efforts and the motivation to why we need this among us, and also about the technical challenges of deploying social robots in the wild, in real-world environments, and be able to assist us there. So my field of study is called human-robot interaction, and it deals with all the aspects from understanding, developing, and in evaluating how robots that are built for or work alongside humans and all the different challenges. So these robots, because of this human aspect, are often called social robots. And social robots have a special characteristic. So most of them are designed in a way such that they communicate with people in similar ways that we humans communicate with each other. And I'm not arguing that all robots in the future will need to be social, but instead that there's a special place for social robots in our future society. And this place is been driven by multiple factors. It can be economical, it can be even demographic trends. For instance, countries like Japan, Portugal, where I come from, or even Sweden, are facing a very aging population. At the same time, very happily, life expectancy is increasing. But this opens opportunity for having technology, and in particular social robots, that are capable of assisting people such that the older adults, for example, could live independently and in dignity in their homes longer. Another application where social robots have been used successfully is therapy, for example, with children with autism, or providing tutoring assistance for children with special needs. So why is it that we need social robots, this physical device, in these tasks that are mainly cognitive, and we're not talking about physical tasks? Research has shown that the physical presence of a robot has a very strong impact on people. For example, a study from Yale University has shown that people are much more willing to comply when they are asked something by a robot than they do by other types of media, like a virtual agent on a screen. And this can be very powerful. For example, if we think about rehabilitation, and when people in their homes need to comply and perform exercises on a daily basis such that they recover. If they have this motivational companion that could help them and motivate them to perform the task, this would probably be more successful. So this is one of the examples. So how do social robots look today? And these are some of the examples of robots that we have mostly in laboratories, but also in some real-world and commercial applications. As you can see here, a lot of these robots have some sort of resemblance with the human appearance. And this is not just because we want to replicate machines or behavior just by so, but it's because this embodiment serves very important communicative functions. So let me give you a human-human example. When, for example, I am talking to this audience, and if someone makes a head nod after I say something, I can clearly perceive, and even without thinking too much, that you're understanding my message. But if you're frowning, I probably will try to repeat something or formulate my problem in a different way. So we have found that people behave exactly the same next to robots, and they also attribute these internal states when robots display behavior. So we can think of social robots as having the potential to be one of the most natural and intuitive user interfaces that we have ever built. So we don't have to learn how to use them, because we, as humans, are learned to interact with each other. So if we can interact with a device in a very seamless and intuitive way, we don't need to worry about the way we do it, but we can focus on the functionality and how this machine is capable of assisting us. So, but I mentioned that a lot of the robots we have right now, especially social robots, live in the laboratory. And why don't we have robots in the real world today, in the social real world? Well, there are many challenges of having these robots living these constrained environments that often have the perfect lighting and sound conditions, or silence or lack of sound, and only one person at a time coming to the robot, then just placing them in the wild well, where the environment is much more messy and challenging. So a lot of my work has been focused on developing algorithms that enable these robots to be robust enough to be deployed in these social spaces in assisting people in their real lives. I'm going to give two examples of some of the projects that I worked on in the effort of this, that also kind of reflect the main challenges that we are facing in this field today. So the first example is about empathy. And before I tell you why and how we need empathetic robots, let me give you a working definition of empathy. So psychologist Martin Hoffman defined empathy as an effective response more appropriate to someone else's situation than to our own. So why would we want a robot to be empathetic to us? Well, the motivation came from this robotic chess companion that I started working on even in my master thesis, and I continue working on it in my PhD at the Technical University of Lisbon. And this is a robot that is able to play chess with children, and as children play, the robot is able to provide feedback by facial expressions, lights and sounds on how well the children is doing in the game. And in fact, we found that in the initial short-term, like one single interaction study with each child, that the robot's expressive behavior was indeed helping kids to gain a better understanding of the chess game. And this is very good, because if they understand what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, they are more likely to become better at it and want to play more. But so this changed, or the children's perception and levels of engagement while interacting with the iCat changed in a repeated interaction study where over 5 weeks we had this robot in a school where kids have chess as their extracurricular activity. This was an elementary school in Portugal. And we noticed that their engagement levels decreased quite a bit after the first few weeks of interaction. And one of the reasons why this happened was because children started realizing that the robot was not doing nothing more than simply responding to the game events. So chess is a competitive game. So as the children were playing, there were cases where the iCat was winning. And the more and more the robot was winning, the happier and happier the robot would become, even if children were starting to feel a little bit frustrated. So this notion that the robot is not taking into account what I'm feeling, what I'm expressing, changed the dynamics of the interaction. So using these results, and in the context of an EU-funded project, we started working on an effect recognition system that that would enable the iCat to understand the child's affective state in real time and respond accordingly. So not only just based on the game events. So this effect recognition system, and this is one of the findings about real-world implementation, was only be able to tracking whether children were in a positive or a negative valence. So we were not really aiming for very prototypical emotions like excitement or disgust or boredom. And this is because in this particular context, those very intense emotions happen very seldomly. So in the real world, often what we express is very contextual and is very subtle. And this is one of the main differences that we need to be aware when we move robots from laboratory to the real world. So in this case, the ICAT using this system, very simple, only positive, negative, affective state. If the child was in a negative state, the robot would display an empathetic reaction to it and also some supportive behavior. So, for example, suggesting a good move or offering help in the game or providing an encouraging comment. And just by this simple change of the system, in a new repeated interaction study with a new set of children who had never played with the iCat for 5 weeks, we found that children's level of engagement remained almost constant over the 5 weeks that we had the robot in the school. So there are these social cues that are very important when we talk about human-machine interaction. And of course they apply to robots as well, because when they have a body, people expect certain things of robots. So one of the other challenges about deploying robots in real-world environments has to do with the ongoing need of anticipating all the possible situations that might happen. And this is, for example, in the chess environment, things are quite structured, but when we start talking about open dialogue domains or just free interactions, things can become more challenging. So you don't need to understand what's in here, but I just want to give you an example of a high-level diagram of all the possible things and states and transitions that this was actually from a previous system that we had to, as programmers, anticipate in the robot. So all the things that the person could say to the robot and all the things that we could, and how the robot would respond to all these. And this is just, it gives you a little bit, probably like 1 or 2 minutes of interaction between the user and the robot. So if you want to have robots in real world over long periods of time, it starts becoming unreasonable to think that one single person or one small group of people is able to program the entire behavior for these robots. And so also there's an aspect of it which has to do with repetitiveness. If the robot always greets the person in the same way, or if it employs the same sequence of behaviors over and over again, people will start changing their attitudes because the robot will become very repetitive. So we call this the content authoring problem. And one of the projects that I worked on with my colleagues at Disney Research before I joined KTH was trying to address this content authoring problem in social robotics. So we developed a system that enabled a conversational robot to acquire new behaviors without the need of expert users programming the robot. So we didn't author any of the behavior for the robot, but even more important, without the need of having users situated in the interaction doing so, which is typically the case when we think about learning from demonstration or learning from experience. So we relied on a technique called crowdsourcing, which has to do with breaking down a task in smaller subtasks that non-expert users could do, typically over the internet, and they receive a brief compensation for it. So this robot was able to summarize certain events that happen in the real world as the form of a narrative. And these events were typically events that the robot had no response for. So it would query crowd workers who took 3 different roles. So the first set of workers that we call the authors were able to just give us the next dialogue line of two characters in a conversation. They didn't even need to know it was a robot. After that, a new set of workers that we call the editors judged the content provided by the authors, and by doing so, when we had multiple editors, we were able to exclude some of the behaviors that many editors thought they were not appropriate. In the final step, a new set of workers gave us a possible expression to go with that dialogue line, with that utterance. And so in this way, the robot was able to gather collective intelligence from crowd workers, non-expert users, that it could then use in real interactions with people in an office environment. So the first case study that we worked on was this, we used the Furhat robot, which is actually developed here in Stockholm and was a spin-off from KTH. And we call this robot Kevin. And Kevin is intended to personify this friendly person who you can meet every day at the coffee machine, and is just able to do chit-chat with you. So I will show you a little bit of a video that displays a typical interaction between one of the workers of this office environment where Kevin was deployed for 2 weeks and Kevin.
Hello, Kevin. How are you?
Hello, Robert.
How are you doing?
I'm good. You?
I'm good too.
You sounded hesitant. You sure?
Well, it's a bit cold outside.
It sure is.
But I can live with that.
Oops, gotta go.
So this oops, gotta go is a signal that Kevin reached a point in this behavior decision graph where it had no way to respond to Robert. So, and I want to point out again that none of this was defined by us. This all emerged from crowd workers interacting with each other and working on a creative narrative task. So at the end of this day, when nobody's in the office, Kevin goes on into the internet and it will spend his daily allowance by reflecting on the interactions that ended in a failure state, so in this oops, gotta go, and not in something that we consider a successful end of conversation, such as goodbye or see you later. And it will ask crowd workers, how should I respond if someone comes back to me again and this situation happens? And by doing so, it can gradually expand its own behavior. And so the next day, if Robert or some other worker comes up to Kevin with a similar conversation and they face a similar conversation, then Kevin will know how to respond. So this is a very simple situation, but it was the first case study to investigate this approach where we don't need expert users to develop the entire behavior of robots. So we're almost at the end. I just would like to finish with the main takeaways of the talk today. So I hope you've seen that social robotics is an extremely multidisciplinary field. So not only we need roboticists, computer scientists, engineers, but also behavioral scientists and even non-expert users that can give us very important ways to build behavior and social behavior into robots. And although robots still struggle with things that we can do very effortlessly, such as understanding when someone is bored or understanding when is the right moment to intervene in a group conversation, progress in this area is happening really, really fast. So social robots are coming, and to be able to be deployed in the wild over long periods of time, robots will need to capture, understand, and respond to these subtle dynamics that are characteristic of real-world social situations. And the better they are at understanding human social behavior, and the better they are at conveying their own internal states and intentions to people, the better this communication between people and robots is going to be. And consequently, the better robots will be at assisting people in a variety of domains where application domains such as assistive living, healthcare, collaborative manufacture, education, and so on. So thank you very much for your attention.